If power and money were a race, Saudi Prince Salman's family only needed one step back to cross the finish line. They wields an empire, a single entity generating more profit than Apple, Google, and ExxonMobil combined. But that's just the glitz and glamour to dazzle the public. This video will strip away the surface and expose the strategic architecture behind this billionaire family. Watch until the end, because the apps you use every day are already part of the empire from the Middle East's network, the machine that funds everything. On the 11th of August 2019, Saudi Aramco filed for an initial public offering that permanently changed how the world understood corporate value. When trading opened, the company crossed a valuation of $2 trillion within 2 days. Not 2 billion, not 200 billion, 2 trillion. That single number made every other company on Earth, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, look like a regional business by comparison. And the entity that controlled the majority of those shares was not a fund, not an institution, not a consortium of investors. It was one family. Saudi Aramco produces more than 5.4 million barrels of oil every single day. To visualize that, if you stack those barrels end to end, the column would reach the moon and back every 4 days. The cash flows generated by that output eclipse the entire GDP of most nations. In 2022 alone, Aramco reported net income of $161.1 billion, the highest annual profit ever recorded by any company in history. More than Apple, more than ExxonMobil, more than any private enterprise has ever generated in a single year. But the number that actually matters is not the profit, it is what happens to the profit. Unlike ExxonMobil or Shell, which distribute earnings to shareholders and answer to quarterly earnings calls, Aramco operates with state alignment. Profits redirect with precision. No external shareholder demands short-term returns. No activist investor forces dividend increases. Capital flows exactly where the Saudi government decides it flows, into Vision 2030 infrastructure, smart city development, clean energy transition projects, and sovereign investment vehicles managing hundreds of billions of dollars in parallel. The infrastructure this machine funds is staggering in scale. NEOM, the smart city project under construction in northwestern Saudi Arabia, carries a projected cost of $500 billion funded primarily through Aramco revenue. The Red Sea project, a luxury tourism development spanning 28,000 square kilometers, represents another $800 billion commitment. The Diriyah Gate cultural development in Riyadh, estimated at $63 billion, is converting a historic site into a destination that will compete directly with Abu Dhabi's cultural district and Dubai's commercial infrastructure. None of this requires foreign loans. None of it requires external approval. Aramco generates the capital internally, and the Saudi state deploys it with the precision of a private equity firm operating without accountability to outside investors. What makes this machine genuinely terrifying is its structural design. Aramco does not just produce oil. It controls the reserves beneath the ground, the pipelines moving the product, the refineries processing it, and the distribution networks delivering it globally. Aramco owns 268.8 billion barrels of proven reserves, enough supply to maintain current production rates for approximately 50 years without discovering a single new field. The world's largest oil company, the world's most profitable corporation, the foundation of a $2 trillion valuation, and every dollar it generates routes back through one family's control structure before it touches anything else. That is not a company. That is a sovereign printing press wearing a corporate logo. The palaces that never empty. In 2023, a property transaction completed quietly in Paris that real estate analysts are still discussing. A hotel that has hosted every sitting American president since Woodrow Wilson, every major European royal family, and virtually every head of state who has passed through France in the last century changed hands through investment structures linked to the Saudi royal family. The George V Hotel, valued in excess of $500 million, did not change its name, it did not change its staff, it simply added another layer to a portfolio that was already continental in scale. Prince Al-Walid bin Talal built that portfolio over 4 decades through Kingdom Holding Company, founded in 1980, with a philosophy that most Saudi royals never attempted. Instead of concentrating capital domestically, he exported it. Stakes in Citigroup when the bank was restructuring, early positions in Twitter before the platform became a global information infrastructure, significant holdings in Four Seasons Hotels, Fairmont, and Accor hospitality chains operating hundreds of properties across every major market on Earth. Each investment embedded Saudi capital inside institutions that Western governments and financial systems depend on daily. His estimated fortune of $17 billion is not stored, it is deployed. His primary residence in Riyadh reflects the same logic applied to domestic space. The compound contains over 300 rooms constructed using Italian marble, sourced from the same Carrara quarries that supplied Michelangelo. Gold-accented interiors finished by craftsmen flown from Florence. Reinforced security architecture designed by contractors who previously worked on embassy-level protection systems. Comparable royal-scale construction projects place its current value well above $500 million, and that figure does not account for the land beneath it, which carries its own generational appreciation independent of the structure above. In London, his mansion near Hyde Park carries a valuation of approximately $150 million, positioning him within walking distance of Mayfair's private banking district, Belgravia's diplomatic corridor, and Westminster's political infrastructure. Distance from power, at this level, is itself a measurable cost. That $150 million location eliminates it entirely. The palaces of King Salman bin Abdulaziz operate on a different scale entirely. Al Yamama Palace in Riyadh functions simultaneously as royal residence and administrative headquarters. Expansive ceremonial halls host foreign dignitaries under ceilings that required years of artisan restoration. Secured meeting chambers with layered communications infrastructure handle discussions that never appear in any public record. Its estimated value runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars before accounting for land or historical significance. Al Salam Palace along the Red Sea in Jeddah serves as a coastal diplomatic retreat, a controlled environment engineered for privacy, where foreign leaders arrive by water and depart without public exposure. Murabba Palace, originally commissioned in the 1930s, functions today as a preserved symbol of Saudi statehood, its cultural value now exceeding any commercial appraisal. What unites every property in this portfolio is structural intent. These are not homes. They are instruments. Capital deployed abroad through Kingdom Holding attracts global partnerships. Architecture anchored domestically projects permanence. Together they form a lattice that is simultaneously flexible enough to move with global markets and solid enough to outlast any single political cycle. The world's most durable empires were never built on oil alone. They were built on stone, positioned deliberately, and never left empty. Comment below. If you could own one property in this portfolio, the Riyadh compound, the London mansion, or the Paris hotel, which one gives you the most actual power, and why? Assets engineered for absolute performance. The superyacht Serene was not purchased to be photographed. At over 130 meters in length, it cost $500 million, making it one of the most expensive private vessels ever acquired. But its value is not in the number, it is in what the number buys. Dual helipads enable secure arrival and departure without port exposure. Noise-dampening architecture eliminates external disturbance at the molecular level. Hydrotherapy pools, spa-grade recovery facilities, and custom sleeping quarters are engineered to stabilize the body during extended periods at sea. The layout minimizes visual clutter deliberately, every design decision reducing cognitive load for whoever occupies it. Serene is not a yacht, it is a floating isolation chamber worth $500 million. That philosophy extends across every asset MBS controls personally. His private aviation fleet carries a combined valuation near $1 billion. These aircraft are not configured as flying lounges. Cabin pressure and oxygen levels are calibrated to reduce decision fatigue on intercontinental routes. Circadian lighting systems regulate sleep cycles automatically across time zones. Fully enclosed rest suites allow uninterrupted recovery between high-stakes engagements. Gulfstream and Boeing interiors are stripped of standard configurations and rebuilt from scratch, each modification adding millions to an already significant acquisition cost. The aircraft does not transport a person. It preserves a decision-making state. Ground movement follows identical logic. The custom vehicle fleet, estimated at tens of millions of dollars, integrates advanced suspension systems that eliminate road vibration across desert terrain. Mercedes-Benz S-Class platforms with posture-corrective seating reduce physical fatigue during extended urban transfers. Rolls-Royce Phantom interiors with acoustic insulation rated to concert hall standards eliminate external noise entirely. These are not chosen for appearance. They are chosen because cognitive performance degrades under physical stress, and degraded performance at this level of decision-making carries consequences worth billions. Real estate compounds across Saudi Arabia and abroad, each valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars, are structured around privacy corridors, soundproof planning rooms, and restricted access zones. Controlled environments where information flow, human access, and time itself can be managed with precision. Public-facing grandeur is architecturally present but functionally secondary. What separates this system from standard billionaire asset accumulation is measurable intent. Every acquisition solves a specific problem. Serene eliminates geographic exposure. The aviation fleet eliminates cognitive degradation during travel. The vehicle fleet eliminates fatigue during ground movement. The compounds eliminate information leakage. Wealth at this level is not measured by what is owned. It is measured by what is eliminated. The art of owning history. On the 15th of November 2017, a Leonardo da Vinci painting sold at Christie's New York auction house for $450 million. The room went silent when the hammer fell, not because the number was unexpected, because everyone present understood what had just happened. The most expensive artwork ever sold at public auction, a 500-year-old portrait of Christ, painted by the same hand that produced the Mona Lisa, had just transferred from Western institutional custody into Saudi control. Salvator Mundi did not move to a museum. It disappeared into a private collection, and its location has remained officially undisclosed ever since. That single transaction communicated something no press release could articulate. Owning Salvator Mundi places MBS inside the lineage of the Medici, the Habsburgs, and every empire that understood cultural ownership as a form of permanent authority. Oil revenues fluctuate with markets. Sanctions affect capital flows. But a $450 million masterpiece attributed to Leonardo da Vinci retains influence regardless of geopolitical headlines. Cultural assets cannot be frozen by swift exclusions or challenged by IMF assessments. They operate in a completely separate register of power. The watch collection extends this philosophy into objects worn daily. MBS acquired pieces from Patek Philippe and Richard Mille with individual valuations ranging from $300,000 to over $2 million per timepiece. A Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, one of the most mechanically complex watches ever produced, with only 7 existing worldwide, carries a private market value exceeding $3 million. A Richard Mille RM56-02 tourbillon sapphire retails at approximately $2 million and is engineered to maintain precision under conditions that destroy conventional instruments. These are not luxury accessories. They are philosophical statements about durability, precision, and the relationship between power and time. What distinguishes this collection from typical billionaire acquisitions is the absence of visibility. None of these objects are displayed publicly. No social media, no magazine spreads, no auction previews. Ownership remains sealed, almost deliberately obscured, because at this level, visibility dilutes authority. The fewer people who can confirm an asset exists, the more influence it carries among those who already know. Cartier, Van Cleef & Arpels, and Grahu pieces sit in vaults appreciating independently of market cycles. Each acquisition functions simultaneously as a store of value, a cultural signal, and an insurance policy against the volatility that affects every other asset class. History's most enduring empires did not just control territory, they controlled symbols. And symbols, unlike oil fields, never depreciate. The man, every decision roots through. In 2015, Mohammed bin Salman was appointed Minister of Defense at age 29. That same year, he became head of the Council for Economic and Development Affairs, controlling the direction of an economy generating over $700 billion in annual GDP. Both appointments happened within weeks of his father ascending the throne, not months, weeks. To outside observers, it appeared sudden. That number appears frequently in financial media. It is also the least important number attached to his name, because $25 billion in personal assets is not what gives MBS his position in global power structures. What gives him that position is the Public Investment Fund. The PIF currently manages over $700 billion in assets across 6 continents. Its expansion target is $1 trillion, a threshold that would make it one of the 3 largest sovereign wealth funds on Earth, alongside Norway's government pension fund and China Investment Corporation. But unlike those funds, which operate with parliamentary oversight and public reporting requirements, the PIF answers to one person, not a board, not a committee, one person. The fund's portfolio reveals the scope of that control. A 5% stake in Uber worth approximately $3.5 billion at acquisition. a $2.3 billion position in Tesla acquired in 2020 during a single quarter. A $45 billion commitment to SoftBank's Vision Fund, the largest single allocation in venture capital history. Newcastle United Football Club, acquired for £305 million in 2021, embedding Saudi soft power directly into English Premier League infrastructure. LIV Golf, launched with $2 billion in initial funding, fracturing the global golf establishment and positioning Saudi capital inside the sport's most lucrative media rights cycles. Each investment follows a pattern. MBS does not deploy capital into passive financial instruments. He deploys it into industries where ownership creates narrative control: sports, technology, entertainment, infrastructure. Sectors where visibility generates influence that compounds independently of financial returns. The security architecture surrounding this concentration of authority is equally revealing. Secure compounds across Riyadh, valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars, maintain communications infrastructure that operates independently of civilian networks. Movement across the kingdom involves convoy systems with redundancies that eliminate single points of failure. Decision cycles are shortened by removing intermediaries. Information flows inward before it flows anywhere else. $25 billion is what MBS owns personally. $700 billion is what he controls institutionally. The distance between those two numbers is where actual power lives. And that distance is not measured in money. It is measured in the number of global decisions that cannot be made without his awareness. The heir who was never allowed to be ordinary. In 1985, a child was born inside a palace in Riyadh that most Saudi citizens had never seen from the outside. The building itself, a secured compound worth hundreds of millions of dollars, was not a home in any conventional sense. It was an environment. Every corridor, every meeting room, every restricted wing had been designed with a single objective: to produce someone capable of operating a system that most people never see. That child was Mohammed bin Salman, and from the moment he could comprehend language, the education began. The palace he grew up in was not filled with toys or indulgence. It was filled with advisors, economists, legal experts, senior administrators, and military strategists rotated through regularly, not as guests but as instructors. By his early teenage years, MBS understood how ministries interacted, how national budgets moved through approval cycles, and why timing in governance mattered more than title. This was not accidental. It was a curriculum designed by proximity to power, rather than by any formal institution. The assets surrounding his upbringing reflected that philosophy. Secure residences valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars were structured with isolation zones, soundproof planning rooms where conversations left no external record, restricted access wings where information was controlled at the entry point, rather than after distribution. These environments did not teach MBS to appreciate wealth. They taught him to use it as infrastructure. His early proximity to King Salman, then governor of Riyadh province, accelerated the process. Salman oversaw urban expansion and infrastructure projects worth tens of billions of dollars. At the time, entire districts of Riyadh reshaped by decisions made in rooms MBS observed directly. When he formally entered politics in 2009 as a special advisor, the placement was not ceremonial. He was positioned inside the decision loop, reviewing land allocations, development budgets, and long-term capital deployment strategies. What followed was not a rise, it was a revelation of preparation already complete. Ministries did not intimidate him because he had watched them operate from the inside for years. Loyal technocrats were elevated into positions across defense, energy, and finance, not randomly but according to a structural map that had been forming for a decade. Decision paths shortened, competing power centers dissolved, authority concentrated. The philosophy extended into every environment MBS controlled. Development zones valued at multiple billions of dollars were restructured to reduce administrative friction. The same logic that governed his upbringing: reduce variables, increase velocity, maintain control, became national policy. This is what engineered succession actually looks like, not a ceremony, not a document. A decades-long process of immersion so thorough that by the time formal power transferred, the transfer itself was nearly invisible. The system had already adapted. The institutions had already adjusted. The heir had already become the operator. Power was not inherited here, it was installed, layer by layer. Starting before anyone outside those palace walls knew the installation had begun. Comment below. Do you think MBS would have become who he is without being born into that system? Or does this level of power only exist because the environment manufactured it from the beginning? 1 dynasty. A machine generating $2 trillion. Palaces across 3 continents. A $500 million yacht built for isolation. A $450 million painting that vanished from public view the moment it sold. A sovereign fund controlling $700 billion answering to one man. And an heir engineered from birth to inherit a system most people never see. There are 3 lessons. Lesson 1. The gap between what you own and what you control is where real power lives. MBS owns 25 billion personally. He controls 700 billion institutionally. Build systems, not just assets. Lesson 2. Visibility is a liability. The most powerful assets in this story are deliberately hidden. Power that needs an audience can be challenged. Silence protects authority. Lesson 3. Succession is engineered, not inherited. The most effective transitions happen so gradually that nobody notices them occurring. If this changed how you see wealth and power, subscribe to Wealth Dominion and like the video. We track the hidden systems behind the world's most powerful dynasties, monarchies, and billionaire empires. Thanks for watching.